The year was 2004. Christmas 2004 to be exact. And it was the year that me and my middle brother got a very special present. Where we both got a Game Boy Advance each. I got the black one, and my brother got the iconic translucent blue one. The games we both got for our first ever gaming console that we owned was interesting for one of us. My brother got a Yu-Gi-Oh game, which I can't remember the full name of it, but it was a really fun one. A really fun game. While I got a Scooby-Doo game that was confusing, to put it lightly. I know I've said in the past that the first game that I ever played was Mario Kart Super Circuit. And while technically it is the first game I played, it's a game I didn't actually own at the time. Because it belonged to my aunt, on my mum's side. I played it on her GBA. However, while that Christmas from 20 years ago, it's now over that now, it was really cool. There was also 2 other presents that we got back then that ended up starting off an even longer road in gaming for my brothers and myself. For one of my paternal uncles both got me and my brother games. For me was Terminator 3 Redemption, and for my brother, Medal of Honor Rising Sun. No gifts, but there were 2 things that made us question why he got us these gifts. The first thing was the 2 games were for Terminator 3 it was 16 rated, and Medal of Honor Rising Sun was 12 rated. So pretty mature games, but not really something to get for your 10 and 8-year-old nephews at the time. Second thing, and this was a big problem at this point, they were both PS2 games, and we didn't have a PS2 at the time, so they were put in the cupboards of my parents' room for safekeeping until we actually had a PS2. A few months had passed since then, and with no sign or thoughts of getting a PS2, the urge to get one was put on the back burner, especially considering by the time that March rolled around, there were other much more serious problems that I had to face at the time. Like, maybe a potentially life-threatening asthma attack. For those who don't know, I've had asthma for all my life. This was the first, and hopefully the only time, that it deteriorated to the point that I spent half of March in hospital. I won't go into too much detail about it in this video, at least since I don't want to go on a tangent and change the tone of this video by talking about my asthma. This is a PS2 related backstory after all. So the 2.5 week hospital stay was, to put it lightly, mostly meh. The treatments the nurses were giving me were working at the expense of me getting a good night's sleep every night of my stay, but at least I had some things to stop the boredom. I was allowed to have a loan of my brother's Yu-Gi-Oh game for my Game Boy Advance. I may have had more, but my memory isn't that good on those specific memories, especially except playing while wearing an oxygen mask. Yeah. I also had access to a TV, which mainly my visitors used more than I did, in all its gradient, static, CRT glory. The thing I remembered the most was going down the hall every now and again, as in while I wasn't getting treated, and being able to play on a PS1 the ward had for all the patients to play on, if they so wished. Unfortunately, my memory of what games the ward has completely gone. I know that there weren't any single player games, that's it. Those times playing on PS1 back then brought back the PS2 wanting itch, and it would take a few more months for that itch to be scratched. It took until the end of July for us to actually go out and buy a PS2, and let me tell you, it's quite a special Saturday as it turned out. So, if you've ever visited Northern Ireland or the island of Ireland as a whole, or Irish yourself, there's a good chance back in 2005 you would have come across a shop called Extravision. Extravision was essentially Blockbuster in concept, especially considering it was bought by Blockbuster in the 90s. which I didn't know until writing out the script. If you know what Blockbuster is, then you would know what Activision is by proxy. If you don't know what Blockbuster is, then in all likelihood, you're a Zoomer. Back in my day, we could rent games and return them like, you know, library books, for example. I never really rented any games since I always preferred owning the games instead, but that didn't stop me from enjoying going to Activision every now and again, just to see what they had. For context, the Activision shop that we went to for the PS2 was on a street corner in my nearest city. Here's what it looked like. Ain't that a site that's now, according to what Google Maps showed us its most recent capture, nothing! But there was also one in my hometown that I went on Saturdays if I wanted to go shopping with my mum. One of the highlights of my Saturdays. Well, sadly, however, it's now a tile shop due to the fact that Activision doesn't exist anymore. It's defunct, ripped to the only shop in town to sell games. I still remember making that last trip on Saturday up to that shop before it closed for good. The state of the place was depressing. Like, it looked really empty, and it more or less just ended up with me and my final respects to the shop that I bought so many games from. For example, Pokemon Emerald, and my first F1 game, F1 2004. So many memories were made from the games I bought there, some that still stick with me to this day. The one where I bought the PS2 from, however, was its only memory for me. I already went to that exhibition, entirely down to it being so far out of the way of everywhere else, and again, I was 10. I wasn't exactly independent back then. I was spoiled for choice though in the city, with Game, HMV, and Argos, to name a few, and later down the line, DX. Don't actually remember why we chose Activision over all these other places. Maybe it was down to availability, or maybe it was down to how good the offer Activision had for PS2 bundles. So for context, the PS2 was in its 5th year of being on sale at the time, roughly. The Xbox 360 was on its way, the DS was out around this time, the Wii was out next year. Some of the consoles 10-year-old me didn't know existed at the time, to be honest, but it shouldn't come with too big of a surprise that we bought a PS2 for less than in 2005 compared to when it first came out. It was a Slim model too, so it was a newer version too. So how much did my dad spend on it for his sons? Well, for the PS2 itself and the 2 games we got with it, which were The Simpsons Hit and Run, oh yeah, and FIFA 2004, what? Plus the second controller, it was an eye-watering total of £100. Yes, I'm serious. 100 quid. You can buy deluxe editions of games nowadays that cost more than that. That matte black console in that yellow box it came in, as well as the 2 silver cased games that were bought with it, and a second controller, costs less than the Street Fighter 6 Collector's Edition. Or the only Street Fighter fans watching. Before we went home, my dad decided to pay one of my uncles a visit. This wasn't the same uncle that was mentioned earlier that gave my brother and I Medal of Honor and that Terminator game. This was an uncle that had his own PS2, and he allowed us to take 3 more PS2 games of our choice for us to keep. I'll be honest, the selections we made probably, on paper, looked like it was by decision, considering they all shared a racing/driving game concept. There was Damage Overdrive, a silly game with a few characters voiced by none other than the original Mario Man, Charles Martinet, one of which is my mains, more on that later. Tokyo Road Race, an arcade-style racing game which was fine, I guess, and lastly, Road Rage 3. More on that later. So, after all that, when we then came home, and soon the PS2 was set up. We didn't get to play all 7 games we got that evening, just the ones we bought from Activision. But they were the best source of entertainment we now had, apart from TV and the Game Boy Advances. So I thought I'd share some memories of these games and possibly try them out again, if I can, to see if some certain games I have different opinions of now compared to then. I'm looking at you, Road Rage 3. So we start with Medal of Honor Rising Sun, a game set during the Japanese forces' attack on Pearl Harbor. As you can probably tell, it's a bit of a strange choice of a present for Minoru, considering that this was the present that my uncle got for my brother. This was a game that felt a lot like the CODs at the time, very middle of the road, nothing too special about it. Though when going back and playing it, there were a few glitches, as seen here and here. And now we have the game that I got as a present from my uncle, Terminator 3 Redemption. There's not a lot to talk about this game since it's very harsh with checkpoints, it seems. The first part of the game has you shoot down this airship thing, and once you do that, you move on to the next checkpoint, which is here. Now, while I did end up dying a lot to other teammates, I eventually got to this pickup truck with a turret on it. And all I'm going to say about this section is that the trade controls of this game are the worst I've ever played. You use the left stick and only the left stick to control this pickup truck, and indeed every other vehicle you could drive in this section, this extremely long section, at least it felt like it was extremely long. I actually did make it very far, and so when it did eventually die, the game put me back at the beginning of the section to awkwardly fight the other Terminators again. That's such a load of shit. Why make such a long section of the game and not have any checkpoints? Especially considering that they could have put a checkpoint at the start of the vehicle section, but chose not to. Fuck this game. I won't be back. This game was fine. I kicked my arse back in the day, but it was still fun. Especially with the level of match fixing I did in the PS2 era, where I made myself never lose by using both controllers. Now looking at it from today's point of view, not much changed. I'm still getting my arse kicked, but I'm now able to hold my own, even though I'm still as bad at the game as I was when I was 10. There were better PS2 FIFA games down the line, but this was a decent one to start with, even though I originally wanted the most recent game at the time, which was 2005. But non-stock led to this one being one of two to be bought from that Activision on that day. Well, this game is fun for about 10 minutes. Not a bad game, at least compared to what the next game is, but it doesn't fill me with much excitement like a lot of other recent games do, even back then. I wouldn't call Tokyo Road Race meh, mediocre, heck even boring. It's just an arcade game that's been brought to the PS2, and in my opinion, I would probably enjoy a game like this more in an arcade, provided there's no Mario Kart Arcade in there to begin with. Otherwise, I'd be on that more. Oh fuck no, not this game. This game was the one that I didn't like back in the day. I thought that it was trash. I didn't like how the controls were. I remember using the right analog stick to accelerate. I thought it was such an awkward control scheme that I thought it was the worst game that we had ever owned. Here I am now in the present day. I played Road Rage 3 for the first time in almost 20 years recently, and I can only say that I owe an apology to this game, kinda. You see, back when I was 10, I didn't think to check the options part of the menu, in which the controls can be changed. And to my surprise, the default settings on my totally legit copy of the game had accelerate mapped to X. So did I just dream that? Or is there some sort of Mandela effect that I'm having with this game? That being said, however, after playing the game again, there's one other problem that I came across, and it's possible that it's just my totally legit copy making to do this, but this game's handling's the worst I've ever experienced. I like the idea of drifting. I enjoyed it in other racing games, like in many Need for Speed games, especially on Current 2. And even in Tokyo Road Race, where I can drift in that and still feel like I can control the car. Most of the time. I don't get that feeling in Road Rage 3. I feel like drifting in this game makes it unplayable to some extent. Even with the control set or configuration I'm very comfortable with, I keep hitting the walls every single time. So in conclusion, the game isn't as bad as I remember it being, but dear god, it's still trash even with me now knowing that I can change the button mapping. Also, side note, This game was developed by Atlas, you know, the company behind Persona and Shin Megami Tensei, and published by Phoenix Games, the company behind such fascinating games like Dalmatian 3 and Snow White and the Seven Clever Boys. What the fuck happened to have these two companies work on a game together? That would be like if LGN came back from the dead and started working with Microsoft on a first-party quiz game that had factual errors within it. It wouldn't make any sense at all. This game was the biggest regret I've had in all of my years with a PS2. I sold this game with most of the games I've mentioned here, and now that I'm much older, this is one of the most fun games that I've ever played. There were two characters I mostly played as, Cinder and Foulmouth. Cinder was a devilish little shit full of toilet humour, while Foulmouth was, like his name suggests, a foulmouth duck. Nowadays, I prefer Foulmouth entirely because who wouldn't want to hear Charles Martinet swear every now and again as a duck? Finally, the cherry on top of the PS2 cake on that day. What can I say about Subsist and Run that I haven't said already? This game is my favourite game of all time. My brother and I still play this game every now and again, even to this day, regardless of being on the PS2 or not. Nowadays, this game is mostly easy for me to play, but back then, I stank. For a considerable amount of time, we were stuck on Bonfire of Humanities, the third mission in Nisa's level, which was also the third level in the game as well. We ended up having a neighbour of ours who had the game cover one day and beat it for us. That was bad on our part, admittedly. Now though, we can beat that mission ourselves, through trial and error mostly. Beyond the PS2 version of the game, Sims Sit and Run was fun, regardless of the console you played it on. The version that you guys are seeing is the PC version with a mod launcher. This version is the one I would suggest getting, since it performs better than the PS2 version, and you can make use of the game's thriving modding community to play beyond what the base game story is. This game is still popular even 22 or so years after its release, due to its speedrunning community too. There's many categories that you could choose to do, like ASM, which is the way I play the game, which is to beat all the story missions as fast as possible. You can do 100%, which is pretty self-explanatory. And even joke categories like doorbell percent, which is to press all the doorbells in the game as fast as possible. And Matt Greening percent, which is a reference to what the creator did the first time he played the game, in which he kicked Marge from the Simpsons house to the Quickie Mart. Yeah, I know. It's just a silly and fun game with so much character and humour that may not hold up in today's society, like Opera's level for example. But despite that, it's the one game out of these 7 I would encourage people to play in order to understand why I see this game as my all-time favourite game.
Just do this in the first place. And the crowd goes wild.
So anyway, those were the games that we had owned at the end of the day. Some were very good, some were pretty bad, some I would put in between categories somewhere. But it didn't stop us from spending almost the whole evening on the PS2. And by the time we went to bed, my brother and I were looking forward to playing more when we woke up. The following morning, we woke up and one of us wanted to play something first on the PS2. So one of us went to turn it on and started it up. But for some reason, it didn't boot up. We were both confused until we noticed the light on the power button. The light that was meant to be just a solid red colour when it was off. It was flashing red. That Sunday morning, we spent trying to troubleshoot the heck out of this issue on the PS2 had. Which I remind you, we only got the previous day. Our dad decided that we should go back to the exhibition that we went to yesterday to see what they can do to help. I didn't end up going on that trip for whatever reason, so what I'm going to say next is all hearsay that either my dad or brother said. What the exhibition employee said is that they would give us a replacement as a straight swap for the one that broke, rather than having us pay for a new one, which was awfully nice of them. Yippee! Thankfully, this replacement PS2 we got outlasted the broken one by quite a considerable amount of time. It lasted around 19 years until it bit the dust too. It was running on its last legs anyway for the past few years. battling disk reading errors, and overheating all the time. Over those years though, we've ended up building quite a sizable collection that went upwards of somewhere in the region of 50 games. And some of those games we had also made its way into my all-time favourite games, like Need for Speed Underground 2, Ratchet & Clank 3, F1 2006, and some that I think are pure and utter shit, like Let's Make a Soccer Team, and Gaelic Games Football 1 and 2. However, a lot of these games that we had on day one, we don't own anymore. They were sold on to places like TX. Only Simpsons Sit and Run and FIFA 2004 remain physically in my possession. Though Cell Damage Overdrive does now live on digitally in my possession on the Switch. It does make me very nostalgic thinking back on these memories, the good and the bad, I'll admit, with these games, and to think that even around 20 years on, the memories still feel fresh in my head. How much the world of gaming has changed in that time, and how much having all the consoles I've owned in the past has made me the person I am today. If you guys want to, you can leave a comment down below and let me know about your own experiences and strange occurrences that you have had with any of your own consoles. Hopefully there'll be more of these videos to come from me over the next couple of months. I do have a few ideas, some of which may go down a route of talking about the bad games I played in the past. I'm looking at Gaelic Games Football, for example. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll see you guys next time.